My brother got my wife pregnant, and my mom told me to let it go for the baby's sake. Then I realized she'd been helping him steal the family business I built. So I did this and let it all burn. Alright, Reddit. I've been thinking about posting this for a while. I need to get it out of my head and onto something before I lose my mind replaying it on loop every night. Get a snack and listen to this mess. I'm Adam, 35 male. Welder by trade. Fabricator when the job calls for it. I've been running hot metal through my hands since I was 16 years old. Learned everything from my dad in the shop he built from nothing in Tulsa, Oklahoma. My dad, Hank, started the business in 1987 with a single truck, a portable Lincoln welder he bought off a guy going bankrupt, and about $800 in his pocket. By the time I was old enough to hold a stinger and not burn myself too badly, he had 3 rigs, a proper shop with 2 bays on a half-acre lot off 41st Street, and contracts with half the industrial outfits in the county. He taught me everything, not just welding, but how to bid jobs without leaving money on the table or pricing yourself out. How to talk to foremen who think they know more than they do. How to spot a client who's going to stiff you on payment before you waste 40 hours of labor. How to run a tight site where nobody gets hurt and nobody cuts corners. When he got sick 4 years ago, I was the one who kept everything running. Lung cancer. The kind that doesn't negotiate, doesn't respond to treatment, just takes what it wants until there's nothing left. He spent nearly 2 years fighting it, while I worked doubles and triples to keep the shop afloat. I'd weld all day on whatever job was most urgent, drive back to the shop, do the paperwork and scheduling at night because someone had to, catch maybe 3 hours of sleep on the couch in the office, and do it all again when the sun came up. My hands were cracked and bleeding half the time from the combination of heat, chemicals, and not enough rest. I was popping ibuprofen like candy just to keep my shoulders moving and my back from locking up. Went through a period where I was averaging maybe 20 hours of sleep a week. Lost 15 pounds I didn't have to lose. My wife at the time said, I look like a corpse that forgot to lie down. But I kept every contract. Didn't lose a single client. Paid every supplier on time or close to it. Kept the 3 guys we employed getting their checks every Friday without fail. Dad passed 2 years ago this coming March. Went in his sleep at the hospice, which was a mercy, considering what the last few months had been like. Before he went, he gave me his old welding hood, the leather one he'd had since the 80s, all scarred up from decades of sparks and spatter, stained with sweat, and probably some blood from the times he nicked himself and kept working anyway. He sat me down in that hospice room, barely able to talk, and pressed it into my hands. This isn't a gift, he said. It's a handoff. He squeezed my wrist. You're the only one I trust to keep my name clean. Don't let them turn this place into a joke. He said I'd earned it. Said I was the one he trusted to keep his name meaning something. Said he was proud of me in a way he couldn't be proud of the others. On paper, he left the business to all 3 of us kids equally. Me, my younger brother Derek, and my older sister Raven. Each owned a third of Briggs Welding and Fabrication. It sounded fair. Looked good in the will. In reality, I was the only one who actually worked there in any meaningful way. Raven had her own life. Good job in accounting up in Kansas City. She stayed out of the day-to-day operations, but checked in when things got complicated. Called every few weeks to make sure I wasn't drowning. She was sharp, practical. Dad used to say she got all the brains and I got all the stubbornness. Then, there's Derek, 29 years old, my little brother. Never held a job longer than 8 months his entire life. Charming as hell when he wants to be. Got that smile that makes people trust him even when every instinct should be screaming otherwise. Dad tried to get him into the trade when he was younger. Spent 2 summers attempting to teach Derek the basics. But Derek didn't want to sweat. Didn't want to show up at 5 a.m. when it's freezing. Didn't want to earn anything he could charm his way into instead. Dad eventually gave up. Said some people just aren't built for real work. Said Derek would have to find his own path. I think it broke something in him, admitting that about his own son. After Dad died, Derek suddenly got real interested in the family business. Started showing up at the shop unannounced, talking to clients like he knew what he was discussing, offering opinions on jobs he didn't understand, suggesting changes to processes that had worked fine for 20 years. First time he walked into the bay acting like he owned the place, I was elbow deep in a repair. Relax, he said. I'm just trying to help. It's our legacy. I didn't look up from the beat I was running. Legacy doesn't show up at noon and leave at 2. Our mom, Cheryl, runs the office side. Scheduling, books, invoicing, client communication. She's good at it, keeps things organized, but she's also spent Derek's whole life making excuses for him. In her mind, he's just misunderstood. Just needs the right opportunity. Just needs people to believe in him, instead of always comparing him to his brother. When I brought up his inconsistency once, she shut me down fast. He's trying, don't punish him for that. She enabled every bad decision he ever made. Bailed him out of debt twice that I know of. Covered for him when he flaked on responsibilities. Told everyone he was finding himself when he was really just avoiding any form of accountability. And when Dad died and Derek started sniffing around the business, she was thrilled. Finally, her baby boy was taking an interest in the family legacy. Meanwhile, I'm the one bleeding for the place and nobody seems to notice that either. I was married to Selena for 4 years. We dated for a year. got married at the courthouse, moved into a small house I was still making payments on. Looking back, I can see the cracks I ignored. The way she'd complain about me working too much, but never offer to cut expenses. The little comments that felt like jabs. You're always tired. You never want to do anything fun. It's like living with a roommate who smells like smoke. Over a year ago, Selena told me she was pregnant. I was in the garage cleaning my tools after a 14-hour shift. Pipeline repair out near Owasso for a feed processing plant. Emergency call. I was covered in slag dust and grinding residue, barely keeping my eyes open, running on coffee and spite at that point. She walked out through the side door and just said it flat. I'm pregnant. Okay. I set down the grinder. When did you find out? Don't start. Later, I found out she'd been sitting on it for weeks, waiting for the right moment, or maybe just dreading telling me. I stood there for a second, trying to process what she'd said. We hadn't been trying. Hadn't even really discussed having kids in a serious way for at least a year. Things between us had been distant lately. She was on her phone constantly, going out with her friends more often than usual, coming home late and being vague about where she'd been, or who she was with. I figured we were just in a rough patch. Married couples go through that. You push through. You don't bail. But pregnant. That was real and permanent and changed everything. I hugged her, told her we'd figure it out. My brain immediately started running numbers the way it always does. How much I'd need to save over the next several months. What we'd have to buy. Whether the insurance through the shop would cover everything, or if we'd be eating costs. Whether I could take any time off after the baby came, or if I'd have to keep grinding because there wasn't anyone else to cover the work. She didn't seem as excited as I expected. She smiled when I hugged her, but it didn't hit her eyes. I told myself she was probably just scared. First kid. Big life change. Normal to feel overwhelmed. Over the next few weeks, things got worse instead of better. She got cold. Short with me over everything. Irritated by my presence in a way she'd never been before. I'd ask how she was feeling, and she'd snap that I was smothering her. I'd give her space and stay out of her way, and she'd accuse me of not caring about her or the baby. Couldn't win either direction I went. Then Derek started coming around the house more often. He'd show up randomly to hang out, watch TV on my couch, eat food out of my fridge. He'd be there when I got home from work, sitting in my living room, laughing with my wife about something I wasn't part of. I'd walk in covered in grime after 10 or 12 hours of actual labor, and they'd both look at me like I was the one interrupting their evening. I told myself I was being paranoid. Derek was my brother. Selena was my wife. They were family now, and families hang out. Nothing weird about your brother-in-law coming by occasionally, but I noticed things I tried to explain away. The way she'd light up when he walked in the door, more energy than she'd shown me in months. The way she'd text constantly, and then put her phone face down the second I walked into the room. The way Derek would make little comments that felt like needles dressed up as jokes. How's the grind going, Adam? Must be nice having someone keeping the house warm while you're out sweating all day. When's the last time you actually took your wife somewhere nice? One night he was feeling bold. Somebody's gotta keep her company while you're gone. I stopped chewing. Looked at him. Come again. He laughed it off. Selena changed the subject. But I saw his eyes. He meant it. I started sleeping worse. Not just from the physical exhaustion of the work, but from the thoughts I couldn't shut off at night. I'd lie in bed at 1 a.m. running scenarios through my head. Talking myself out of suspicions. Talking myself back into them. Going in circles until the alarm went off, and I had to drag myself to another 12-hour shift on 2 hours of broken sleep. The worst part was how Selena started rewriting our history. Little comments designed to make me question my own memory. She'd say things like, "You've always been distant, even at the beginning, and when have you ever prioritized us over that shop?" When I'd push back and remind her of specific times I'd been there for her, she'd get this wounded expression and ask why I was being so defensive, why I was trying to start fights, why I couldn't just admit that I'd been neglecting her for years. "Why are you acting like I did something wrong?" she'd say. She was making me feel crazy for noticing what's right in front of me, making me apologize for having eyes and a memory. I didn't have a name for it at the time. I just knew something was deeply wrong, and every time I tried to address it, I ended up feeling like I was the problem. Derek started showing up for family dinners at Mom's place more often too. He'd always managed to sit next to Selena at the table. Small things that looked innocent if you weren't paying attention. But I was paying attention by then, and I could see the pattern forming even if I didn't want to believe what it actually meant. One night at Mom's, Derek made a comment about how Selena deserved someone who appreciated her. Said it right in front of me while looking directly at her with that smile. Played it off as a joke when I gave him a hard look. Just saying, "Bro, you're a lucky guy." The grin never left his face, but his eyes were watching me, measuring how much he could get away with. My sister Raven called me one night out of the blue. "Just checking in," she said. She asked how I was holding up, and I gave her the usual fine. She didn't buy it, said I sounded like hell. Sounded exhausted in a way that wasn't just about work. I told her things were complicated, but I was handling it. Lot going on with the baby coming and the shop and everything else. She got quiet for a second. Then she said something that stuck with me. She said, "Adam, you've been carrying that family since Dad got sick. All of them. Don't let them put you in the ground too." I didn't know what to say to that. Didn't have the words or the energy to explain what I was noticing. So I just told her I'd be alright and ended the call. I wasn't alright, but I didn't know yet how bad things were about to get. We have security cameras at the shop, basic system I installed 3 years ago after some tools went missing. 4 cameras covering the bays, yard, and office entrance. Footage saves to a hard drive and overwrites every 30 days. About 6 weeks after Selena told me about the pregnancy, I was at the shop late, past 10 at night, finishing up paperwork. Derek was supposed to handle and didn't. I was in the office going through the stack when I decided to pull up the camera footage from earlier that week. No specific reason. Just killing time while I waited for some numbers to add up on a spreadsheet. Clicked around, scrolled back through timestamps. I landed on Tuesday night. I'd been out on an emergency call that day. Burst steam line at a plant near Sand Springs. Dangerous work. Took me until almost midnight to get it patched and safe. The shop was supposed to be empty while I was gone. It wasn't. I watched Derek's truck pull into the yard around 9 p.m. Then I noticed Selena's car was already parked by the fence. She must have gotten there first. I watched them walk toward the shop together. Derek had his arm around her waist. She was leaning into him, laughing at something. They went inside Bay 2, where we keep the mobile rig trailer and some equipment storage. For about 40 minutes, nothing on the outside cameras. They were inside. When they came back out, she was fixing her hair. He was tucking in his shirt and adjusting his belt. They stood by her car talking for a few minutes. Then they kissed. She drove off. He stood there for a minute watching her go, then got in his truck and left. I sat in that office chair staring at the screen until my vision blurred. My blood was pounding so hard I could feel my pulse in my temples. My hands were shaking, not from fear or sadness, from something uglier, something that wanted to break things and hurt people. I grabbed a length of scrap pipe from the corner of the office and swung it into the filing cabinet next to the desk. The impact dented the side panel and knocked the whole thing sideways. Then I threw the pipe across the room. It hit a shelf and sent a bunch of parts catalogs and binders crashing to the floor. I stood there breathing hard, fists clenched so tight. Then I stopped myself. I made myself stop. Because I've seen what happens when you let that kind of rage drive the bus. You say things that get repeated in court documents. You do things that follow you forever. I've watched guys throw away everything they built because they couldn't walk away from a moment. I wasn't going to be another cautionary tale people whispered about. I saved the footage to a USB drive. Then I sat in my truck in the parking lot until almost 2 a.m., just sitting there in the dark. While the anger burned down to something cold and hard and patient, I didn't go home that night. Slept in the truck at a rest stop off the highway. Told Selena the next morning that I got stuck late on a job and crashed at a motel instead of driving tired. She didn't question it. 2 days later, I called Raven. Told her everything. She just went quiet for a second, processing. Then she said something that probably saved my life. No confronting, no texting, don't tip them off, I'll get the paperwork moved. I'm coming down this weekend and we're going to figure out how to handle this the right way so they can't twist it around on you. Raven drove down that Saturday morning. 4 hours from Kansas City. Didn't even complain about the drive. That's who she is. When things get serious, she shows up. We met at a diner out near Jenks. I brought my laptop and showed her the footage in my truck, parked in the far corner of the lot where nobody could see the screen. She watched the whole thing without flinching. Didn't look away, didn't make faces, just watched it like she was reviewing evidence in a case. When it ended, she closed the laptop and sat there for a minute. Then she told me this wasn't just about Selena. This was about Derek, about what he'd been doing since Dad died, that I was too exhausted and distracted to notice. She pulled out a folder she'd brought, printed documents, email threads, bank statements she'd accessed through her partial ownership rights. As an owner, she had view access to the books, QuickBooks reports, vendor logs, and the bank portal summaries Mom thought nobody checked. Raven had been quietly watching the business books for months, comparing what Mom was reporting against what the actual numbers showed. Things weren't adding up. Money moving in ways that didn't match invoices. Payments to vendors that seemed inflated. Client deposits that sat in weird accounts for too long before hitting the main business checking. Small discrepancies that added up over time. But the document that made my stomach drop was a draft contract. Something Derek had been working on with Mom behind my back. A restructuring agreement for the partnership. If I signed it, I'd be giving up operational control of the shop. I'd become a minority partner in practice, even though I still owned a third on paper. Derek would take over day-to-day management. I'd still work there, still weld, but I wouldn't have any say in how things ran. And there was a clause buried in the middle, written in the kind of legal language designed to make your eyes skip over it, that would make me personally liable for any safety violations or quality issues that came up in the next 5 years. Meaning if anything went wrong after Derek took over, I'd be the one holding the bag. My certification, my name, my responsibility for his incompetence. Raven looked at me across the truck cab. This isn't paperwork. It's a noose. I stared at the highlighted clause. He wants the shop and my neck. Raven said Derek had been laying groundwork for this for months. Talking to Mom about how I was overworked and making mistakes. How maybe it was time for fresh leadership. How the business needed someone with new ideas instead of someone stuck in Dad's old ways. Mom believed him because she wanted to. Because Derek was finally showing interest in something productive, and she'd been waiting his whole life for that. I asked Raven why Derek would go this far. Yeah, he was lazy. Yeah, he cut corners and avoided responsibility. But this was calculated. This was vindictive. This was a plan executed over months with the goal of taking everything from me. She reminded me of something I'd tried to forget. Dad's last year, when he knew he wasn't going to beat the cancer. He sat down with each of us separately to talk about the future, what he wanted, what he expected. Derek went in there expecting to be named the successor, the new face of Briggs Welding, the golden boy finally inheriting what he deserved. Instead, Dad told him the truth, that I was the one he trusted, that Derek hadn't earned any of it, that if Derek wanted to be part of the business, he needed to learn from me and prove himself through actual work, not just showing up and smiling. Derek walked out of that conversation and didn't speak to Dad for almost 2 weeks. Skipped visits to the hospice, barely showed up to the funeral. He never forgave Dad for that. And he never forgave me for being the one Dad chose. This wasn't just about sleeping with my wife. This was about winning, proving Dad wrong from beyond the grave, taking everything I had because he felt entitled to it. Raven laid out what we needed to do. I couldn't just storm out and quit. If I left without protecting myself legally, they could blame every problem on me afterward. My name was on safety certifications for active jobs. My credentials were attached to contracts in progress. If something went wrong after I was gone, that liability clause or something like it could still be used to come after me. She knew a lawyer in Kansas City who handled business disputes and partnership breakups. Mean guy. Didn't play nice. She was calling him Monday morning. Until then, I had to pretend nothing had changed. Keep showing up. Keep working. Keep smiling at Derek and Selena like I didn't know exactly what they were doing when I wasn't around. That was the hardest part. Going home and looking at her. Watching him show up at the shop and act like my buddy. Keeping my face neutral when every instinct screamed to put him through a wall. But I did it. Because Raven was right. If I was going to survive this, I had to do it clean. No outbursts. Just cold, patient preparation while they kept digging their own graves. The truth came out about 3 weeks later. Not through some dramatic confrontation I'd planned. Just the way things naturally fall apart when people get sloppy and comfortable. We had a big job going. Structural repair work on an agricultural processing facility outside Collinsville. Contract was worth around 40 grand if we delivered on time and passed inspection. Good money. The kind of job that keeps the lights on for a few months. Derek had been handling the client communication because he wanted to prove he could land and manage accounts. I was running the actual work on site with 2 of our guys, Jesse and Eddie. Both solid welders. Both knew the difference between Derek's promises and reality. Halfway through the second week of the job, the client site manager pulled me aside during a break. Big guy named Walter. He said there was a problem with the invoicing. His accounting department had received 2 bills for the same phase of work. Different amounts. Different invoice numbers. One came through our official system. The one Mom managed. The other one came from some email address he didn't recognize, but had Briggs Welding in the name. He wanted to know what was going on. Was this a mistake, a system error, or something else? I told him I'd look into it and get back to him by end of day. But I already knew what it was. Derek was skimming, creating fake invoices for work that was already billed legitimately through the main system and pocketing the difference. Classic fraud scheme. Stupid to try on a client this big with a site manager this sharp. But Derek never thought he'd get caught at anything. I called Raven from my truck during lunch. She called a lawyer. Within 48 hours, we had a paper trail showing Derek had pulled the same stunt on at least 3 different clients over the past 6 months. Small amounts each time. 2 grand here, 1,500 there. Enough to add up to real money over time, but not enough to trigger immediate red flags. Until Walter caught the duplicate. That Friday afternoon, I drove to the shop for what I knew would probably be the last time. Mom was in the office doing her usual end-of-week stuff. Derek was there too, which wasn't normal for a Friday. But I figured someone had tipped him off that something was happening. Selena had come by, which was really unusual. She almost never showed up at the shop. I figured Derek told her to be there for support or backup or whatever he thought he'd need. I walked into the office, set down a folder on the desk. Raven had helped me put it together. Copies of everything. The camera footage on a labeled USB drive. The financial documents showing Derek's invoicing scheme. The draft restructuring contract with the liability clause highlighted. I looked at my mom first, told her I was done. Done with the shop. Done with the family business. Done pretending everything was fine. She started in immediately, talking about family unity, about working through disagreements, about how we all needed to come together for the sake of the baby that was coming. She actually said that. For the sake of the baby. Whose baby, Mom? I said. She blinked at me. Say it out loud. She went pale. Looked at Derek. Looked at Selena. Neither of them said anything. Derek tried to start talking. Bro, don't do this. You don't get bro anymore. I cut him off before he could say anything else. Told him I knew everything. The footage from the shop, the fake invoices, the restructuring plan designed to make me liable for his failures. I told him I had copies of all of it with my lawyer and with Raven. Selena tried to spin it. Started in with the script I'd heard pieces of before. Said I was never around. Said she felt abandoned. Said Derek was there for her when I wasn't. Said she didn't plan for it to happen. It just did. And maybe if I'd been a better husband, none of this would have occurred. You weren't alone, I said. You had my brother. I looked at her for a long moment. You can keep him. I turned back to my mom, told her she could let Derek run the shop now. He's been wanting it. Now he's got it. But I was pulling my certifications off every active job, taking my tools, removing my name from any permits, any contracts, any liability. My name was on weld procedures, job sign-offs, and safety paperwork for 3 ongoing contracts. I notified every active client in writing that I was no longer their qualified guy, and nobody gets to use my credentials or signature going forward. You don't get to run reckless under my name. She could find someone else to blame when things started falling apart. She said I was abandoning my family, abandoning my father's legacy. I told her the family abandoned me when they decided I was the sacrifice play, the guy who works until he breaks so everyone else can coast and complain. I walked out the door, didn't slam it, didn't yell, just left. That night, Raven drove down again, brought her truck in a trailer. We spent 5 hours at the shop loading everything that was legally mine, my personal welding machines that I'd bought with my own money, before Dad even got sick, my hand tools, my safety gear, the toolbox Dad gave me when I started, his hood from the wall. Raven took photos and videos. Photo, serial, box, move, she kept saying. Made me write up an inventory with serial numbered. You ever miss being scary? I asked her. I never stopped. Around midnight, headlights swept across the yard. Derek's truck. He got out fast, slamming the door, and stormed over looking like he wanted to start something. You can't just take this stuff, he said. This is company property. Raven stepped in front of him, holding up a folder. Every item on this list was purchased by Adam personally. Receipts attached, serial numbers documented. Your mother has a copy. So does our lawyer. She didn't raise her voice. Didn't need to. You can call the cops if you want. They'll tell you the same thing. Or you can go home and let us finish. Derek looked at me over her shoulder. I didn't say anything. Just kept loading boxes. He stood there for maybe 30 seconds. Then he got back in his truck and left. We left a notarized copy with the lawyer and sent one to Mom via certified mail so nobody could claim later that I stole business property. By 2 a.m., my truck and Raven's trailer were loaded. I stood in the empty bay where I'd spent a decade of my life and waited to feel something. Sadness, regret, anger, anything. All I felt was tired, bone-deep exhaustion that had been building for years. Raven put her hand on my shoulder and said, "Let's go." So I went. The following weeks were lawyers and paperwork and separation agreements. Raven's guy was everything she promised. He carved out my exit in a way that protected me completely. My third of the business value would be paid out over 18 months. Not a fortune, but fair. They made one payment. Then the excuses started. My lawyer filed the moment they missed the second one. The buyout was secured against equipment. If they defaulted, the lien bites. Not overnight, but it puts a boot on their option. More importantly, he made sure I was legally insulated from anything that happened after my departure. Any safety violation, any contract disputes, any financial problems. If it blew up, it was on them. I moved Selena's stuff out of the house while she was staying at her sister's place. My lawyer told me exactly what I could do legally, and I did it by the book. Temporary possession, documented property, zero drama they could twist, packed her things into boxes, stacked them on the front lawn, changed the locks. She called screaming threats about lawyers and police. I forwarded everything to my attorney and let him handle the responses. She moved in with Derek within a week. Mom helped them find an apartment. Happy little family unit. I'm sure that lasted about a month before the reality of living with Derek set in. Meanwhile, I started picking up work on my own. Small jobs at first. Repair work for people who knew me from the shop days. Word travels fast in industrial trades. People knew I was the one who actually delivered quality work. They knew Derek was a talker who couldn't back it up. Within 3 months, 4 of the shop's biggest clients had pulled their contracts and moved them to me. I didn't even solicit them. They just called, said they wanted to work with someone reliable. Someone who showed up when they said they would and did what they promised. Mom called me once during this stretch, said the shop was struggling, said they needed my help getting through a rough patch. Maybe we could work something out. You wanted Derek in charge. Call him. Adam, please! I'm not your cleanup crew. She started crying. I hung up. About 7 months after I walked out, a DNA test result arrived in my mailbox. Baby had been born by then. No return address on the envelope, just my name. Inside was one page. 99.9% probability of paternity match between the baby and Derek. I didn't need a lab to tell me what I watched, I said to nobody. I looked at it for maybe a minute, felt nothing. I already knew. This was just paperwork confirming reality. I put it in a file drawer with the rest of the documentation and went back to work. It's been pushing a year since I left. Here's what happened to everyone. Briggs Welding and Fabrication is functionally dead. Not officially closed, but might as well be. After I pulled out, the problems stacked up faster than Derek could make excuses for. He couldn't manage the jobs. Overbid some contracts so badly they lost money even when they finished on time. Underbid others and then tried to cut corners to make up the difference. Promised delivery dates he couldn't meet because he didn't understand how long the actual work takes. Suppliers started demanding cash up front because he kept missing payments. Jesse, one of our old welders, texted me about 3 months in. Said Miller Supply had cut them off completely. COD only, and even that was shaky. He said Derek had tried to charm his way through it on the phone, blamed me for leaving them in a bind. The supply rep apparently cut him off mid-sentence. Said something like, "I don't care who's mad at who, pay the 18 grand or you're done." They lost the account. Jesse quit the next week. The good welders quit because they didn't trust him to run a safe site. Mom burned through savings, trying to keep the lights on. Then came the inspections. I used to handle all the safety compliance, kept everything documented and tight. Never had a serious violation in 10 years. 6 months after I left, the shop got hit with 3 citations in 8 weeks, fines, a stop work order on 1 job. I got a call from Walter, the site manager from the Collinsville job, right after the stop work hit. He'd heard the inspector showed up and everything went sideways. "Adam, you still the cert guy on record for Briggs?" "Not anymore. Pulled my name months ago." "Good, because they're trying to say you signed off on procedures you didn't touch." "I've got documentation. My lawyer has copies. That's not my signature, and not my problem." Walter grunted. "Figured. Just wanted to hear it from you. They've got guys standing around on site doing nothing while your brother argues with the inspector. Real professional operation." I didn't say anything. Didn't need to. A client sued for breach of contract over delays. Mom called me twice during this period, begging, crying, saying the family needed me, saying I was the only one who could fix it. I told her she made her choice when she pushed that restructuring deal and protected Derek over me. Now she gets to live with what she chose. Derek bailed before the final collapse. Typical. Once it stopped being fun and started requiring actual work and accountability, he was gone. Last I heard, he moved to Texas chasing some business opportunity a friend supposedly had. Selena went with him. The baby went with her. She tried to come see me before they left. Showed up at my new shop with the kid on her hip. Said things didn't work out how she expected. Said Derek wasn't who she thought he was. Said she'd made mistakes and wanted to talk about the future. "I didn't think it would turn out like this," she said. "Yeah, that's the theme with you." She held the kid out toward me like that was supposed to change something. "He's not mine," I said. "And neither is your mess." I told her to leave and not come back. She stood there looking like she expected me to change my mind. I went back to welding. After a few minutes, she left. Haven't seen or heard from her since. Mom doesn't speak to me anymore. Blames me for everything. Says I destroyed the family by refusing to forgive and keep sacrificing. Says I let my father's legacy die because of my pride. Last thing she said to me was, "Your father would be ashamed of you." I said, "Don't use Dad like a shield. He'd be ashamed of what you let Derek become." She hung up. Haven't heard from her since. I think about Dad sometimes. What he'd say if he could see how it all played out. I think he'd understand. He always knew what Derek was. I run my own outfit now. Adam Briggs Fabrication. Just me and 2 guys I trust completely. We stay busy. Last month we passed QC on a pressure vessel job. Third-party X-ray came back clean. 0 rework. Walter referred us to 2 other facilities in his network. Said he tells people if they want it done right the first time, they call Adam. I kept Dad's hood. It hangs on the wall in my shop where I can see it every day. Reminds me of what he said near the end. That the hardest thing in life isn't the work. It's knowing when to walk away from people who don't value what you give them. Raven calls every Sunday. Last week she sent me a client lead. Friend of hers needs structural work on an expansion. That's what family looks like. No guilt, no conditions. Just showing up. The rest of them can figure out their own lives. Guys, we are so close to hit 100,000 subscribers on this channel. If you are not subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing. It really helps hit that 100,000 mark. Thanks for making this dream come true.